Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here wherever you're joining us from, whatever time zone that may be. We're so grateful for your time and being with us for this wonderful free webinar presented by Compassion Institute. My name is Stephen Butler. I'm Executive Director for Compassion Institute. At Compassion Institute, our work is to advance compassion as an active force and guiding principle in the world to make a more kinder world. We develop programs for individuals and organizations to develop individual and societal well-being. Um, our session today will be led by one of our program directors, Tori Saris, who directs our public programs at Compassion Institute. She will be guiding us into this wonderful session with Thupten Jinpa and Lakiba Pittman. So with that, I will go ahead and officially welcome you and turn it over to Tori to lead us into this wonderful session. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you all for being here. We are very excited, and I will say up top, I already know an hour together is not going to be enough, so thank you for being here. We are here today to have a discussion on compassion and racial equity. Racial equity is defined as when people of all races and ethnicities are treated in an egalitarian manner. Compassion is an innate quality that offers the possibility of responding to suffering with understanding, patience, and kindness, rather than fear, anger, and repulsion. How can we utilize our innate compassion to move toward a more racially equitable society? That's what we're here today to talk about. And with us, we have two absolute wonderful speakers and experts in their fields. We have Thupten Jinpa, Ph.D. Thupten Jinpa was trained as a monk at the Shartsi College of Gondan Monastic University, South India, where he received the Geshe Laram degree. Jinpa also holds a BA in philosophy and a PhD in religious studies, both from Cambridge University. Jinpa has been the principal English translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama since 1985 and has translated and collaborated on numerous books by the Dalai Lama. Jinpa's own publications include A Fearless Heart, How the Courage to be Compassionate Can Transform Our Lives, and translations of major Tibetan Buddhist works featured in the Library of Tibetan Classics series. He has been a core member of the Mind and Life Institute and its chairman of the board since January 2012. And Jinpa is president and co-founder of Compassion Institute, founded in 2017. Thanks for being here, Jinpa. Our other wonderful speaker we have with us today is Lakiba Pittman. Lakiba Pittman is a senior CCT teacher who has lended her expertise to Compassion Institute in webinars, teacher trainings, and our compassion cultivation training teacher cohorts. Lakiba also serves as a full-time lecturer at Menlo College, where she teaches courses including diversity, DEIB in the workplace, cultural expressions in media, and race and racism. She is also a diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI consultant, with decades of leadership experience in the corporate, tech, and philanthropic sectors. Lakiba artfully weaves together a variety of healing and contemplative modalities in specialized workshops, consulting engagements, and coaching for clients. Lakiba is also a published poet, visual and recording artist with a profound purpose centered on mindfulness, education, social justice, creativity, self-compassion, compassion for others, and compassionate leadership. Lakiba aims to open hearts and minds while savoring the magic of life's journey. Thank you for being here with us, Lakiba, as well. And as we get started today, I'm going to have Jinpa and Lakiba each answer a question for us up top before we enter our settling practice. So Lakiba, we will have you answer the question first, and then Jinpa. Our question holding us in this space today is, why are you here today? Why is the topic of compassion and racial equity a priority for you? Lakiba, you're first.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, I'm really happy to be here, that we could convene together over this topic. But I think the reason I'm here, I grew up seeing both the pain of racial inequity and the power of community resilience and the power of compassion. And I think over time, I realized that justice without compassion can become rigid, and compassion without justice can become passive. And so I think we we need both in order to create meaningful change. And I really love the opportunity to be in community and feel through these issues, talk about these issues. I mean, that's my purpose. Part of my lifelong purpose is to try to bridge our differences. And I think compassion is a pathway to creating that change, because we can open our hearts and our minds to just considering things that maybe we've been closed to in the past. So I'm happy to be here today.
Beautiful, Lakiba. Thank you so much. Jinpa, same question.
First of all, it's wonderful to share the platform with Lakiba. I've known Lakiba for quite a while now, and also a very seasoned CCT teacher. To have you in the community of CCT teachers has always been a real joy. You know, Lakiba has kind of thought very deeply on this question of racial equity, and your phrasing of the tension between compassion and justice is really spot on, because in some ways we can look at compassion and fairness as being the two polar sides that somehow needs to be maintained in a balance to ensure that we have a kinder and fairer society. And I have, personally also, thought a little bit about this tension. My expertise really lies more on the compassion side of the equation. Ever since growing up in India as a refugee child, as a Tibetan refugee, and also our culture itself promotes compassion as the highest value. So the compassion is front and center. And in my own personal life, I still to this day remember the sacks that contained grains had labels like Catholic Relief Service or USAID, with two arms holding each other kind of thing. So I grew up that way. So the power of compassion in my life has been real. And so my sort of exploration has more been on the compassion side, and also having been the principal translator to His Holiness. He is one of the best, most powerful advocate and voice for compassion. And but on the other hand, yes, there is this, because compassion calls us to relate to everybody at the fundamental shared level of humanity. Just like me, nobody wants to be suffering. Everybody wishes to be happy. And also compassion calls for paying special attention to the situation of need and pain. That really is what compassion is. But when we talk about racial equity, then we are talking about the need to pay special attention to historic differences that has been a source of pain. So there's a kind of a tension there, because compassion is in some sense kind of moving us more towards homogenization, if one can call that, kind of, shared humanity, oneness, and pushing in that direction. The issues of racial equity and societal inequities address us to pay closer attention to historic biases and differences and discriminations that have really left their mark on where we are. So I think, I personally like to, because this is right now, it's a topic that is causing a lot of pain and anxiety and confusion. So I think it's important for those of us who take both seriously, compassion on the one side and fairness and justice on the other, to really, at least in our mind, how do we think through these issues? And one way I understand this tension is to really say, okay, the compassion side is really calling us at the level of individual person-to-person relationships, interaction. So when we relate to someone, you would want ideally to relate to that person first and foremost at the fundamental human level, where we are all the same. Just like I do not want to suffer, the other person do not want to suffer. Just like I deserve love, the other person deserves love. So when we relate to an individual in a personal interaction, ideally, if we can relate to that person first and foremost from a stance of compassion, that I think is powerful. The question of equity, it really is more at the societal level, because what it is calling for is to really pay attention to historic issues that has left imprints on the current society where certain groups of people get left out, discriminated against. And in an ideal world, a more mature community or mature society or a more enlightened society would want to pay attention to those aspects of their history, because there's no perfect country or community or society that has impeccable, unblemished history. There's no such things exist. First of all, there is no such thing as a perfect human being, and how can there be perfect societies? So we will all have skeletons. Every country, every society, every community has society skeletons. But one would expect the more enlightened ones are willing to pay critical attention to those aspects and see if those can be righted by adopting certain policies. So I grew up in India, so the language of racial equity is in some ways way more relevant in the Western society, particularly because of the colonial history, and particularly in North America, because North America is a country of immigrants. And then there is a whole history of slavery. So racial equity is a powerfully important societal issue for Western countries in general and North America in particular. Whereas in the country that I grew up in, India, the societal inequity has more to do with caste-based system, especially in relation to what I refer to as Dalits who have been oppressed. And India as a nation chose to actually address this by having non-discriminatory policies, encouraging non-discriminatory policies embedded in the very way in which, for example, like, I'm not proposing that's the way to go, but at least it's an honest attempt. For example, like how do we, the aim of these policies is to find ways to redress these imbalances so that, not only are opportunities open to members of that sector, but also it sets a kind of an example, a kind of a model within the community that would inspire within members of the community to live up to and strive for. So, for example, like there are important seats, slots reserved in the medical colleges, engineering colleges, federal government percentages. So those are honest attempts at addressing historic imbalances that have been caused by past history. Now, I'm not saying this is the way to go, but that's an example. And I think in North America in particular, I think if we want to create a truly egalitarian society, I think the societies need to first address the historic biases and differences that has left the current situation and find ways to address that. I think this is where we have to make a distinction between equality and equity. Equity actually presupposes fairness. Equality is not that directly connected to fairness. Equality is about sameness. And we would want at the individual level, when we treat someone, we would want equality. We would want to treat at the level of fundamental humanity. But at the societal level, a more enlightened society would actually make the choice to address these inequities so that a greater fairness is put in place. Because absolute equality is impossible to achieve. If, for example, in Tibet, there was a king in the 9th century who actually nationalized, seized lands, and redistributed 3 times and then failed, or 2 times or something, but failed. But so inequalities are always going to arise. But what we would want is a more equitable, fairer community where everybody feels included, safe, and a community they can take pride in identifying with. That is the goal. And there, I think compassion really has a key role to play. I mean, like Lakiba said, justice without compassion is heartless. It doesn't work, and it doesn't last very long. Whereas compassion without justice is kind of, there's not much teeth in it. So I think we need both of these. So there might be a little tension, but I think the topic is a very, very important one. So I look forward to questions, because the questions is a place where we can learn a lot more. Thank you. Sorry, I spoke a little bit longer, but thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Jinpa and Lakiba. I know we are eager to jump into questions, and I want to offer us a few moments to settle into the space now that we've had a chance to hear from both Lakiba and Jinpa. Jinpa is going to lead us in a brief settling practice so we can bring ourselves into the space, into these topics and these questions that we'll be considering today. So thank you, Jinpa.
Okay, so I invite you to just reposition yourself, if necessary, to feel more comfortable, more settled. Necessary, just stretching your back, arms a little bit, shoulders a little bit, and then consciously taking some breaths and bringing your awareness and resting it on your breathing. Simply noticing the air coming in and going out. And as you do this, just notice the energy of your mind and body beginning to settle down by slowing down. See if you can feel that silence that this brings. Would now like to invite all of us to connect with that spark that brought us all together here today. Our wish to see a kinder and a fairer world for all. And just imagine that how many millions are out there who share this sincere wish and aspiration. Celebrate the beauty of this aspiration, the purity and the sincerity behind their wish. Okay, let's bring our attention back on our breathing as if coming home. And into our body. Feeling our presence in this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jinpa. It was beautiful. Well, I want to like sit in that meditation. That was really lovely. That was really needed. So it's taking me a second to come out, and I really appreciate that. To start, I have been in combination with some of my colleagues. I've been rereading excerpts of Jinpa's book, which I find a really helpful guiding document when it comes to questions such as bring us into the room today. So to start, I'm actually going to read an excerpt from Jinpa's book and let it kind of guide the beginning of our conversation. So the excerpt I'm going to read. So much suffering and unfairness is caused by structural conditions of our society, such as discrimination based on race, religion, gender, and sexual orientation. When we make compassion our conscious intention for structuring our society, it's the idea of humanity and the alleviation of suffering that concerns us. The individual recipient of justice could be anyone: you, me, white, black, Asiatic, religious, non-religious, rich, poor. What matters is that he or she is a citizen with basic rights and dignity. At this level, justice and compassion, two fundamental components of our ethics, come together. For me, that really creates the space for us to talk about today. So I just want to use that as our entry point and our jumping off point. If either of you have additional thoughts based on that passage, or anything that brings up for you after our opening thoughts and space.
Maybe I'll, Lakiba, you want to jump on? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I kind of see it as, excuse me, a journey. Like, how do you go from one side to the other side? How do you go from ignorance to knowledge? Or how do you go from apathy to empathy? Or how do you go from I'm indifferent to feeling some level of compassion? How do you go from a shut down heart to an open heart? There's a pathway, or there's a transformative quality to me that has to occur to get one's consciousness from one place to the other. And that's why I love compassion so much, because compassion can be the gateway or the catalyst for moving from kind of that harder, tense side to a more fluid, open side. Because you don't necessarily have to always agree with the opposite side, but you have to have a softened heart and a willingness to hear and a level of concern. And so I think many of the issues that we're dealing with are deeply rooted, historical, even in our own family. Sometimes we've been socialized to include some and not include others. We see it in the media. This thing that divides us is so immersed in the roots of life that it can be hard to solve things on the fruit level, right? You could, for example, this isn't racial equity per se, but you could, if you saw an unhoused person and you could give them food, that's really dealing on the level of the fruit. But you're not really solving homelessness, which is more rooted and harder to solve. But I think that bringing compassion in can help at the root level. And we just start where we are, and we live our lifetime continually stepping more into this notion of compassion every day. That's kind of how I'm utilizing this notion of compassion in my day to day. And it's how I integrate it in my courses on racism or cultural differences and how we can bridge. So that's what came to me.
Thank you, Lakiba. Start where we are. That is such a
Yeah.
simple phrase and is so important in this entire conversation. Thank you. Jinpa, your thoughts.
Thank you. Clearly, it is a journey, and without opening our hearts and eyes, there's simply no way compassion is going to show up. I think at the individual level, most of us actually value compassion as part of our self-definition of who we are. Everybody likes to think they are kind and loving and, and to be loved and, to love and to be loved is such a fundamental need. One of the American, William James, one of the, founders of American contemporary modern psychology said that the urge to be recognized and seen is one of the most powerful basic human impulses and drives. So that is really true. So I think, and if we take that seriously, then we do need to open our hearts to others. But along with the opening hearts, as Lakiba said, we also need to open our eyes, because for many of us, I think I would say for everybody, there will be always blind spots. And from the Buddhist point of view, an individual who has no blind spots is an enlightened being, fully awakened Buddha. But I don't think anyone can claim to be Buddha. So, which means by definition, we're all going to have blind spots. And the only way in which the blind spots can be kind of, cleared and, lessened is only through gaining insights and learning. And this is why, this in Buddhism, for example, when we talk about compassion, we don't leave it at the level of evident, obvious suffering and pain. The prayer for the four immeasurables says, may all beings be free from suffering and its causes. So it's a kind of and so the many of the societal inequities are structural causes that are causing pain. And if we are serious about compassion, we should be serious about paying attention to them. So it's as simple as that. And then those of us who don't have, so for example, like men, unless we pay attention and bring empathy, we're not going to have experiential understanding of many of the challenges and problems women face. It's as simple as that. We don't have that lived experience perspective. The only way in which we can learn about them is vicariously through opening up our attention and gaze. Same thing goes for racial equity and inequities. If we take compassion, if you don't take compassion seriously, it's another matter. But if you take compassion seriously, as a value that is important to you, then you do need to pay attention and open up your eyes. And this is why in Buddhism, compassion is always paired with wisdom, because without wisdom, compassion is a powerful force, but it's kind of blind. And then, so I think this is where I think, and in an ideal world, we would want to be able to, the society to be treating all of us in our individual capacity as who we are as another human being. But that is not a reality that we are living in, at least at present. So the whole idea of colorblind, race-blind society is a beautiful one. But if you think that is our reality, then we are fooling ourselves. We're deluding ourselves. So now then the question is, how do we address that? So we address that by, taking a careful look at the structural issues and see if there are ways in which we can readjust it so that it could be fairer. And so that's why, my suggestion in the book that I was trying to get at is that the Western world, at least the liberal democratic world, has benefited enormously by taking respect for individual human rights and liberty as a powerful underpinning of, structural society. So we have laws, and then you can, for example, like in Canada, we have a Charter of Rights. Actually, Charter of Rights trumps every other document in the country. So if there is a law that is proposed, and if you can make the case that it violates the charter aspects of Charter of Rights, actually it's a sort of an ace card. So it's really and then US is also a right-based kind of country, human rights-based country, and so taking the idea of respecting individual human rights and freedom as a foundation of society has had a huge benefit for everyone in the society. So the point is, can we bring compassion now at the same level as respect for individual human rights? What would that mean? Because when you take respect for individual human rights as a foundation of your society, then the laws and policies and regulations and all of this has to take that into account, in formulating them. So are there ways in which we can bring compassion so that the compassion also becomes an informing principle that would shape policies, regulations, and so on. So I think that is the idea I'm trying to get at. And if we can do that, then compassion, unlike individual human rights, respect for individual human rights can be left at the level of individual. When we bring compassion is a communal value. So then the societal aspect has to be brought in. So this is why I think bringing compassion alongside respect for individual human rights as a foundation of structuring a society can be very powerful. I mean, of course, how do we do that? What does it mean? All of this is a much bigger question, but my intuition, and this is the intuition His Holiness has. His Holiness believes that everybody at deep down wants to be good, values good. But the question is, in practice, somehow we seems to fall short. Then the question is, can we make it more conscious principle, not only in our personal life, but also in structuring our society? And this is actually the idea behind Compassion Institute's work. Can we bring it into key sectors like healthcare, where people who are suffering has to interface with caregivers? Can we consciously bring compassion there? Can we bring compassion into the law enforcement practice, where again, the law enforcement officers encounter individuals at a very difficult time, in their life? So this is an idea behind the Compassion Institute's work. Can we find ways to explicitly and consciously bring compassion as an important principle in our structuring and thinking and shaping of society and its practices and culture? Because in the end, it's a culture. Because if cultures change, then individuals living in their society benefits. And cultures are quite difficult to capture because cultures are collective habits that has become kind of norm. We just take it for granted. So the whole question of justice, racial equity is a challenging one because it is saying, okay, let's pay attention to what are the unspoken subconscious biases that are embedded in our culture. Let's open it up and problematize it and take a careful look, see if we can make it, improve it. I mean, that is a challenging question. That's why people find it hard. Many people find it even threatening because most people actually don't like change. Okay, it's kind of me included, and especially as you get older, the resistance to change becomes even stronger. That's very human, but I think it is in the interest of everyone to start once in a while to open up, start asking the critical questions, and that's the way in which human societies improve. I mean, compared to 18th, 19th century, I would say the 21st century, 20th century, 21st century is more enlightened. I mean, that's for sure. And those changes have happened because people have challenged the norms and cultures of a given society, of a given time. And this is how we improve. And why would 21st century be different from past human history?
Thank you both. One question I typed up as you were speaking, Jinpa, was how do we make compassion the cultural norm? So just answer that simple question and we're in a good place moving forward. I don't know that we can do that with our time remaining, but an important idea to bring up. And the idea that resistance to change is human, I think that's so key in this conversation. Any change is scary, and it's in opposition to how we live our life in the safety of our communities. I think one beautiful idea about compassion is that it does not demand that everybody be in the same starting place with our societal issues, beliefs, and experiences. People can come from all different aspects and still have the core idea of compassion. Would each of you be willing to share a time when compassion has supported you in navigating, engaging with people or situations that were in opposition to your own beliefs or situations?
Okay.
A big
Asking
one.
me to go into triggering territory. Well, fortunately, I think that I've been intentionally, consciously engaged in this compassion revolution that's going on within me for a few decades now. And so, as a consequence, I'm much more likely to notice when I get triggered or notice when I'm about to pounce on someone who is harming or afflicting me in some way, or just someone that has a closed mind, or I'm perceiving it as a closed mind. So, one of the things that I notice now that's different than maybe 20 years ago is I'm more mindful. So that's a word we use today. So I tend to notice what's happening. I notice I'm being triggered, right? And once I'm able to mindfully realize what's kind of happening, then I'm able to call my own compassion in. I've it's almost like a neural pathway, but I think it's on the heart level. So I naturally, most times, am able to get to my heart and sometimes take a breath, take a beat, um, protect myself if you know, if it's a volatile situation, I'm certainly going to take care of myself but I've kind of learned how to, I recognize that this compassion walk that I'm on is lifelong, and that I'm not going to be perfect on any day, right? But my heart's intention, my soul's commitment is that as much as possible, I'll bring compassion into this moment. And the way that plays out is sometimes I just get quiet, right? Instead of reacting or overreacting. If it's a safe situation, I'll just kind of get quiet and kind of tap in to my own inner compassion that I'm holding for myself, holding for this situation, holding for this broader dynamic. I'm kind of multiple places at one time that all are rooted in compassion. And because I intentionally practice that from day to day, and I think because I teach compassion, I'm challenged every day, to see if I can make this real, right? And I'm doing pretty good, but not perfect. And then on those days when I'm not perfect, I have compassion for myself. Okay, I tried, or good effort. But for me, it's a returning to base, returning to this desire to live from a compassionate place. And so far, I'm sticking with it, right? And I don't make it every day. I sometimes I fall short. And even when I fall short, when I reflect upon it, I'm able to have a little bit of compassion for whoever confronted me, and a little bit of compassion for myself. And I say, okay, I'm going to wake up the next day and revitalize this compassion that lies in my heart. Sometimes it's kind of dormant, but it's there. And so I try to live each day kind of from that place. It's my intention daily, and sometimes I make it. Yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah. Lakiba, it's so
I got
helpful to
involved in
hear
the
you.
story there.
No, it's so helpful to hear you speak about the challenges that you are challenged every day. I think it's really easy to see you both and see people who have studied compassion for decades and think, well, they must do it perfectly. It must not even be hard for them, right? And so a reminder for those of us who are newer to the study of compassion or engaging in difficult conversations, that it's like you said, Lakiba, all you can do is bring as much compassion into each moment as you can, and know that that's all you can do. That's doing enough, right? And you don't have to be perfect. And as we've said in this space, none of us are. None of us have reached enlightenment. And it's just about trying with each interaction and resetting the next day if we need to, and acknowledging compassion for ourselves. So thank you for speaking and bringing that vulnerability to allow us to remember that we don't have to be experts to utilize this. Jinpa, anything you would want to add or share from your own experience?
Oh, the Lakiba said it very beautifully, what it means to take it seriously on a day-to-day level, and also see it really as a kind of a journey, and don't expect perfection. and also emphasize the importance of bringing self-kindness, once in a while, because often people who are committed to a certain ideal, sort of when you don't pay attention to the need for self-kindness, sort of a intolerance towards yourself sets in, which is actually counterproductive. So I think this is a very important message and insight that I hope people have kind of picked up on this. Thank you for sharing your journey and your daily kind of practice. In my own case, one thing that I do notice is that when I'm able to bring compassion in the form of connecting with humanity of the other side, especially in challenging situations, I notice that there's a greater space for patience on your part. That, and especially I travel a fair bit. So these days, air travels are not the most pleasant part of, experience in life, especially in the US, the lines for the securities and the energy in those security halls. And it's just, and then constantly when there are cancellations and you're trying to rebook, and in the old days they used to be a kind of a booth where you can turn up, but these days everything is just done by phone. I mean, it can be hugely frustrating. I noticed that when you just step back and breathe and say, okay, the person on the other side is trying their best, and also don't take it personally, because the staff member who's trying to help you doesn't even know you personally. So how can you take it personally? Just reminding that really, I notice it's an aspect of compassion. I mean, it's not full compassion, but it's an aspect of compassion is to, you know, uh, recognize the humanity of the other person, and also kind of bringing in a degree of humility. I actually find this to be really, really powerful, actually, because otherwise you get so worked up and and then you end up screaming, and So this was one area where I really felt, wow, this is actually pretty impressive, because in the end you're going to solve the problem one way or another. You're not going to be stuck in that airport forever. I mean, that's for sure. So, but when you're caught in a moment, you seem to take it as eternity. That's the nature of suffering. When we are in pain, we loses the concept of time, and we feel this is never going to end, And this is by opening up the space and, thinking about compassion, and, it really brings that perspective, which I find really, really helpful. And I've been very lucky in my life. Of course, growing up as a refugee kid in India, there were physical hardships, especially with respect to, you know, immediate needs and stuff. But then I was not alone. My own Tibetan community in India, several thousand of us, or we were all in the same boat. I mean, and I personally, when I look back, I mean, no life is perfect, no life is suffering free. But on the whole, I look back, I'm 66. I look back over 66 years, from age 6 7, you can start remembering. But before that, I don't think people can remember. Maybe I can read. I kind of have a fondness of the life that I've lived. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not just happiness, but overall, I look back and I actually, if I were asked to relive that again, I would say, of course, why not? So I think, and part of that probably has to do with, I mean, later on, taking compassion more seriously and trying to make it real. And Lakiba talked about the role of intention. I think intention setting on a daily basis, bringing more kindness in your daily interaction, being more mindful, watching out for your reactivity, just setting those intentions really kind of set the tone for your day. And then in any case, even though when we talk about life, it seems very long, but your life is lived on a one day at a time. So the reality is the day you are living. And if you can make that positive, and at least a positive and beneficial in the sense of you're not living it just for yourself, but you are at least doing something that is beneficial to others, then that is a meaningful life. So it may be naive and simplistic, but in a sense, that's the reality. Our life is lived on a day-to-day basis, and day is the overall frame of this kind of the way in which the time frame in which we live. So I think just finding a way to make that day meaningful and positive is something that we can do.
Thank you both. I think there's so much to sit with everything you both said, and I think so much of these conversations, people are looking for tools. People are looking for answers. What can we do? How can we enact change when we feel helpless? Lakiba, you spoke about apathy earlier, which I think is so prevalent for folks who are facing a lot of hurt, and they see pain and witness, harm being done. Um, and it's overwhelming sometimes to know where to begin. And, then we can go into that place of apathy of, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to disassociate because I'm one person. And I think you both spoke to one person is enough. And sometimes it's just doing what you can each day, making whatever impact you can each day in the small ways that we can. I think that's so important. And for me, obviously, I deeply care about the topics of compassion and try to use that as the guiding principle for myself. But um, I wonder if you could speak to how compassion can help people feel empowered to address some of the inequities that they see, what the world or the role of compassion is in a world that feels increasingly full of friction. I know you both use that as a guiding principle and advice on how to use it to address your anger or hurt from witnessing the suffering.
Well, that's quite a question, right?
In our 8 minutes that we have left, I know.
Yeah, quite a bit. Well, first, I would say just know that there are people who are being hurt, and there are people who are suffering, and there are people who are afraid, anxious from day to day, throughout a day. And they could be in our personal life, in our families. They could be people we know. They could be people in our city, in our state, in the nation, in the world. And we know this concept of common humanity. And so we want to be on the side of compassion, right? We want to have a heart for those who are suffering. We may not know exactly what to do, but I'm believing that having the heart precedes the action that you might take, right? Meaning I feel you have to be in the consciousness of the heart, and being there will guide you on what to do, either individually with a person that's right in front of you, maybe a friend, or in a broader sense. That's what I'm using, meaning to some extent, these are uncharted times where we were making progress in racial equity and all the other dimensions of diversity. We were making progress, and now it's kind of contracted, right? And so there's fear around that, there's anger around that, there's hurt and harm around that. And I think we have to be grounded in the practice. We have to kind of secure our own relationship to compassion and hold it dearly. And with each interaction, we consciously try to live from that place, personally and beyond. I mean, I want a compassion revolution, right? Where I can just know at least that there are people who aren't perfect, but are moving in the direction of holding, because it's part of it is energetic. I'm having trouble getting my words out, but compassion is a living thing. It has a vibration. It has an aspect of healing to it, an aspect of magic to it. So I just encourage us all to continue to cultivate our own compassion and to do it intentionally and to try to spread it out wherever we are, especially over these days that we're living in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Lakiba, I heard you say that compassion is living with an aspect of healing, which I think addresses. We're seeing a lot of comments in the chat, and I think it's not surprising based on what we feel in our society. There's so much anger right now. There's so
Yes.
much hurt and there's so much anger. And I think people struggle, and we're getting questions about how do we use our anger? How do we address our relationship with anger while trying to be more compassionate? And
Well, I think, there's that where you can say no, right? There's that type of compassion where you can push back. You can stand on behalf of, not get in an outright fight, hopefully, but you can. I think Christian Neff calls it fierce compassion. You can stand for something. But I also think being in community can help. Utilizing the Compassion Institute or any other opportunities that you have to gather with other people, that can help kind of mitigate your own trauma and also help you focus on maybe some actions that you can take. That's my initial thinking.
thank you. Jinpa, your thoughts before we begin to wrap up.
No, I think Lakiba said it all. My only addition is to really suggest that it's really important not to give up hope. That I think a sense of overwhelm is understandable, frustration, anger, even a sense of outrage, and in some ways, in certain contexts, outrage is necessary. Feeling outrage is an expression that you care. If you don't care, there will not be such an outrage, sense of outrage. And, we shouldn't be worrying too much about powerful emotions like feeling of outrage. I think those are expressions of something very meaningful to you being violated. I think, but I think it's important that we maintain our optimism and hope. What we are witnessing today is kind of a part of the pendulum swing. And we should not take it for granted that this is the way it's going to be. It's part of, I see this, I mean, maybe I'm being a little naive, but I see this as part of a dialogue that is happening, a painful one. And, in any case, the beautiful part of democratic systems is that no regime is ever permanent. So, so that we sometimes forget that fact, and so I think just it's going to swing, and there are millions and millions of people who actually share your values, who actually have a shared vision of where the society should be moving. So just because there is a stumbling block, the current obstacles should not undermine your, resilience. So I think this is, there's just, in the Buddhist texts, there is this idea of the importance of sense of preparedness. The sense of preparedness involves expecting there's going to be huge bumps, many bumps along the way. And the phrase that is used is put on an armor yourself. I think this is a beautiful concept. I think, what is needed now is armoring yourself and reminding you that there are many millions who share your vision. And it's also what is happening now is part of a discourse that will move back and forth. And in the case of North America, I mean, I chose to live now in Canada, so I'm a Canadian citizen. So I identify myself as being part of North American. One of the things that I admire most about Western societies in general, and particularly in North America, is the kind of openness to talk about challenging societal issues. Partly because North American continent, both Canada and US, are new nations, I mean, like compared to other nations in Asia, which has over 1,000 or several hundred years history, US and Canada are babies, So, and because of that newness, part of the kind of the culture is the willingness to, look at issues and ask the tougher questions. And that has been a beautiful part of American and Canadian kind of societal kind of values in general. And that will remain. Regimes will come and go. But that kind of urge to move forward and what that means, and sometimes you take some steps backwards, but the overall journey, your feet are pointing in the opposite direction, in the direction where you want to go. So I think just reminding ourselves once in a while, this big picture, it really helps. Because otherwise you get so locked on and fixated on the current reality that you start losing hope. So that's, if there's one addition I would make to what Lakiba said, I would make that point. Yeah.
Thank you. I wish we could stay have this conversation for the whole day and many more hours, but I want to acknowledge that our designated time has come to an end. I know you both have so much more insight and knowledge to share, and I appreciate you for letting us take this much of your time and sharing what you did. And I'll just end with my takeaway, which is from both of you, is important not to give up hope and to live each day choosing compassion. Thank you. Thank you for that tangible step, and for sharing so many beautiful insights with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will bring back Stephen to see if there's anything Stephen would like to add, and we'll also end with some upcoming classes from CI. If you want to continue your compassion journey, we have more opportunities this spring. We will have many classes and more offerings to continue this conversation. But anything else from you, Stephen, as we close?
No, just an expression of gratitude to Lakiba, to Jinpa, and Tori, yourself, for leading us in this wonderful session. As you said, it's a conversation that needs to go on externally and internally. And so we hope that this has provided some tools and some structures and navigating in sources of inspiration as we move forward on that journey. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us, and be well.